Let's make Merlot.
I'm Greg.
I'm Julie, and we're the Crafty Winers.
So we're going to show you how to make our Merlot. This is the wine that we make the most of. We usually infuse it with something. At this point, we don't know what we're going to do with this, but we will continue this video with another one that shows how we infuse our wines.
Right now, it's a clean slate for our imagination.
Correct.
Actually, the wine we have right here is the wine we bottled last night, which is a chocolate-infused Merlot, which is really quite tasty.
It's one of our favorites.
Yep, that's good.
So most of our Merlots start the same. It'll be several days to a week before you need to start thinking about if or what you're going to infuse it with. So we'll figure it out, but what are we calling this?
We are calling this March Mimi's Merlot 2024. That's kind of a mouthful, but and I've got it right here on our batch notes.
We were going to call it March Merlot, but she pointed out we might make more than one in March.
Well, we already have. This is our second batch for March so far.
Right.
Yep. So we're just going to actually go through the base recipe, and then once we decide what we're going to do with it, we'll do another video on how we changed it or had fun with it.
There are a lot of skills that we will just point you to another video. We'll link it up above because we don't want to go over things that other people might know. So when we hit something that we expect you to know from another video, we will tell you, we'll point it out. You can go watch that video if you're not familiar with it and then come back and pick up where you left off.
Yep. Okay, so should we get started? Okay, so we use batch notes, which you can do a lot of different ways, but this is how we do it. We do have a video on that as well. So I've put on here the description of our Merlot, which is March Mimi's Merlot 2024, and our batch number. And in the recipe spot, we just write down what recipe we're using, and this is just our basic Merlot recipe, so I wrote that down. And then also in the corner, I put the type of concentrate that we use because we use two different ones, and this one happens to be Nature Blessed, which you can get on Amazon. There'll be a link for that.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is put all of the concentrate into our sanitized little big mouth bubbler.
Say that 10 times fast.
This did not come from Amazon. This came directly from the vendor. So I'll have the link to it below.
So I'm just going to pour this into here.
This
is a much bigger jug.
These are decent primary fermenters. They're nice because they have a lot of access. And the 1 gallon mark, you'll see that it's marked on here, and I recommend that practice. And there's a video that you can watch to see how we mark them. We etch them so that if the marks come off, you can remark them.
Because obviously this one's way more than a gallon.
Yeah, but there's a lot of room at the top, which is good because they're not going to overflow as easily, and it provides oxygen, which is good during fermentation. It's not good after fermentation. We did a video on that I'll link, but that headroom is nice. So we need to get all of the juice out of this bottle. We don't want any of it to be left behind, so she's pouring water in there.
Then I'm going to shake
and we're
it.
using
bottled water.
We don't want to use any of our tap water because it has chlorine in it. And chlorine in small amounts is probably okay, but in larger amounts for sure is not good for yeast.
That looks pretty good. I'll just dump that in there. And now we've made sure we've got all the good stuff.
Okay, so we're going to want to fill this up right now to about the halfway mark, which I think is this rim. I'm just double checking. Yeah, it's going to be on a little big mouth bubbler. It's this ring here. You can see because there's my mark. So she's going to go to the halfway point.
Okay. So then what we're going to do, I have a bowl of also bottled water that's warmish. We warmed it up a little bit to be able to dissolve our ingredients in. And we're going to start by adding a half a teaspoon of this fermento. This is the yeast nutrient.
If we're using it in today's video, it came from Amazon unless we say that it didn't. And I'll have links below for everything. We are pretty big fans of Amazon Prime.
We're going to put in some peptic enzyme, which is for clarifying, and that's a half a teaspoon of that as well.
Stuff from Amazon you get quick and there's no shipping.
Yep, we like our Amazon. And then we are going to add a half a teaspoon of tannins. Normally the tannins do, in red wine, they are in the skins of the grapes, but we are using concentrate, so no telling what they did with the skins.
Yeah, we don't know how much tannin was.
And it's important to have that in your Merlots especially. I think you can use tea also. Some people do that. And then, last but not least, we're gonna put in a 1/4 teaspoon of this bentonite, which also is for clarification purposes.
It's a clay that sinks to the bottom and usually takes sediment with it that binds to it. So it won't end up being in the wine that you drink.
Then I'm gonna use this cute little whisk, if you can see that.
Mini whisk.
And I'm gonna mix this all up really well. We won't make you sit through my whole stirring process. Okay, so now I have stirred this up really well, and we are going to add that into our mixture. And we got a little, always have a little sediment in here on the bottom, so I'm gonna try to get the rest of that out. Something sticky. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay, and then he is going to put this awesome lid on it and, and shake it.
I'm 90% a fan of these little big mouth bubblers. The part that I'm not a fan of are the lids. They get stuck on, sometimes they're hard to get on, and then when you shake it,
They
they
leak.
tend to leak.
Yeah.
And our corgis are at our feet, and I really don't want them to have wine to drink. So if you have one of these and you're following this recipe, just be careful when you're shaking it. Don't put it on its side or it will leak.
It definitely leaks on its side.
Okay, so I shook it really well. You don't need to go overboard at this point because you're going to do it again here soon. But we're going to take a hydrometer reading. We're not going to actually show this on the video. You can watch our hydrometer video to see how to take a hydrometer reading. But we are going to add sugar at this point to get to 1.1 specific gravity, which will equate to about 14% alcohol, and that's where we like our Merlots. So watch our hydrometer video to see how to do the specific gravity, and then you can come back to this one unless you already know how to do it. Normally people don't do it at this point, but we've run into too many issues where we had to add sugar and we didn't do it until we were at the gallon mark, and then we had to remove must, which is this liquid, to get the sugar to fit. So we came up with a formula to allow us to take a specific gravity now when it's half full and predict what that specific gravity will be when we finish filling the vessel. So this will be in the description below. Again, you can wait if you want to wait until you fill up your jug to the 1 gallon mark, then take your specific gravity to find out sugar. You're more than welcome to do that. But okay, so we've added the sugar in here. I haven't shaken it yet because I don't like shaking, and so we're going to do one more step before I do that. She's going to go ahead and fill up now to the 1 gallon mark, which we're pretty close to because we put quite a bit of water in with our sugar.
Yeah.
Can you see the mark?
Yeah, I can see it. The foam is going to be a little bit above it.
Yeah, there is foam in here, which is liquid and air, so it will turn back into liquid. Just to try to account for the amount of foam that you have in there and imagine how much room it's going to take. Now I'm going to shake it. Again, if you're using one of these little big mouth bubblers, be careful you don't get wine all over your floor for your corgis to enjoy. It is just grape juice at this point, so it's probably okay. Okay, so I shook it up good. So at this stage, we are going to check our pH after I get the lid off. So we need our pH to be between 4 and 6. And if you don't know anything about pH, you can watch this video on pH. tells you how to do the reading. So we're not going to show what we're doing here. Keep this video nice and short. So we'll be back in a minute and tell you what our pH ended up being. Okay, so our pH was 4.43, which is fine. It should be between 4 and 6. That's for the fermentation process. The yeast thrive better in pH between 4 and 6. We're not going to adjust it because we've learned that if your pH is in the desired range, it's good.
Literally, when he checked the pH, he said, "Thank God," because it really is a pain to adjust the pH.
Now we're going to put the wine we took out for our pH from our sterile tester. We're going to put in our graduated cylinder and do another specific gravity reading. So again, we linked the video on taking specific gravities.
That's going to make a mess.
It made a mess.
I told you.
So we poured what we had in here for pH testing into our graduated cylinder. We're going to add a little more and do our specific gravity. If you haven't watched our specific gravity video, or if you have questions on how to do specific gravity, go ahead and watch that video. We linked it a few minutes ago. We ended up with a 1.10 specific gravity, which is incredible because that's exactly what we were after. I do want to mention that if you do need to add sugar, it's best to take some of your grape juice out and mix the sugar in that. You may need to warm it to make it easier, but get it real mixed up with its own juice and then put the juice back in here rather than put the sugar in here. It's a whole lot easier to do it that way. So she's putting our initial gravity, which was 1.110 on our batch label, because that's going to be a very important number later. And then we're going to go ahead now and tape that onto the side of our jug. So if you haven't watched our batch note video, it's an important one to watch to know why it's important to keep a batch label that basically records the life of your wine.
And then we're going to do one extra step. You could actually skip this and just go ahead and put your yeast right into here, especially if you're using carboy heaters and keeping up to like 77 degrees.
Our storage room is 55 degrees, and that's where we also ferment. So 55 degrees is a little cool for red wine yeast.
So what I do, we've had good success with this, is take some of the must out, put it in a separate container, and warm this container up to about 80 degrees. And then we add our yeast and let it get super happy, and then we'll add it back into the must, and we will let it do its thing.
Yeah, you don't have to do that if you're not trying to ferment in a cool room. But we find that we have better success if we do it this way, if we start it this way. So that's what we do. One more precaution about temperature: if you used refrigerated concentrate and if you used cold bottled water, you're going to want, just to be safe, and let your must warm up to room temperature before you put the yeast in there. Mm-hmm. You don't want the nice warm cozy yeast to get shocked to death in the cold. So we let this sit for 10-15 minutes in about 80 degree must, and it's all sunk to the bottom and nice and hydrated, and it's starting to get really groovy looking designs on the top. So
Groovy.
Those yeast are having a good time right now.
Yeah, it's looking good.
So she can probably go ahead and put them in.
So I'm going to go ahead and add this to our must. Like so.
We put a whole packet of the yeast in, and the yeast will be in the description below. It's a very good Merlot red wine yeast. But the one packet will do up to 5 gallons of wine. It's a little overkill probably for 1 gallon, but this is the way that we've been doing it, and yeast is cheap, so we like it that way. One little note about oxygen. Oxygen at this point is required by the yeast. You want oxygen for the yeast. So having this headroom is good. After the fermentation process is done, and when we rack, you don't want to use a big container like this with this headroom, because oxygen can damage the wine, and we have a video on oxygen and CO2 that you might want to watch. So the last step before we put this in our storage fermenting area is to fight with the lid on the little big mouth bubbler.
Little big mouth bubbler. Say that 10 times fast. Little big mouth bubbler.
I said it once and I'm proud of myself. You may or may not have one of these to use. This one is almost for sure not going to foam out of the vessel because it's got so much room. But if you're probably using a 1.5 gallon carboy or whatever in a small neck, we're showing you how to do the blow off tube because for one of those you will need it. The size of this is a 5.5 hold bung or bung with hole or a rubber stopper if you don't like the word bung. And I will link that in the description below. And then the tube here fits in perfectly, and I will also try to link that. So then the bung goes on the top of this.
That fits nice and tight.
And the last thing that we are going to show you, even though I think I just said this was the last thing I'm going to show you is how to put the carboy heater that we use onto this. And that will also be in the description below. If you can keep your fermenting red wines at around 77 degrees, you don't need to worry about a carboy heater. But if you, for whatever reason, can't, like our storage room, like we said, is 55 degrees. We store wines in there and we ferment them in there. Chardonnays and white wines like those cooler temperatures, like in the mid 50s, so it's perfect for them, but it's a little bit cool for red wines. So we use these carboy heaters that are actually pretty cheap, and we set them to be 77 degrees. So basically, this is a two-person job in this case. Don't let me pull that away from you. So that's basically the procedure. We put the batch label on the outside of the heater so for quick, easy access. And then on the power unit of this particular carboy unit is the thermostat wire. And it's very important that you have that thermostat wire snugged in between the carboy heater and the jug so that it is measuring the temperature of your carboy or carboy heater and not the temperature of the room that it's in. It could, I don't know how hot these get, but if they get to 150 degrees or so, they're going to turn your wine into wine soup, and that's probably not what you want. So I got that in there. So the last thing we're going to do is take this in, put it on our shelf in our fermenting room, and
put this tube down into our bucket of sanitizer.
So we have a red bucket of sanitizer right now that we use to sanitize everything. So we're just going to move that into our fermenting room, and this tube is going to go right into it. So if you use one of these little big mouth bubblers, you don't need to use the blow-off tube. Like I said, we basically are doing it just so we can show you how to do it. You can use a traditional airlock. This works just like a traditional airlock in that the CO2 can come out and it bubbles into the sanitizer, but nothing can go up the tube. So it works just like a traditional airlock. And if you're using a smaller vessel, you definitely want one of these because these red wines with this yeast
can blow up.
They will definitely come out the top. So
we will have another video coming out in the next couple of weeks that will show you the next step on this actual wine that we just did today. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If so, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Tell it you want to see all of our videos, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.